it's not only having this high-level governance slide that you might get in any consultancy, but it's really about getting into the processes that ZEISS has implemented as a company, and then understanding how people work and do their everyday work.
Hello and welcome to the Data Culture Podcast. I'm Carsten Bange, founder and CEO of Bark, and with me today is again Florian Biegelmeier, because we are in a special Data Festival edition of this podcast. With us today is Alexandra Wander from ZEISS, and she's a program manager and the Responsible AI Office lead. And that will be our topic. We'll talk about AI governance and how it's implemented at ZEISS. Florian, I thought she had really interesting insights to share, didn't she?
Absolutely. So, one thing that definitely stick out to me or was interesting for me to learn is that there are many drivers to do responsible AI. Of course, there's risk. Of course, there's regulation you want to comply with. But it's also about maintaining trust of your customers actually in a company, into the systems and products a company provides. We talked about what does it actually mean, what is responsible AI, and we also dived into the question how to implement it actually. What can we reuse? Which tips does she have for companies out there that want to start this journey as well? So, Carsten, why don't we just dive into it?
Let's go. Hi, Alexandra. Great to have you.
Hi, Carsten. Hi, Florian. I'm so excited to be here.
Excellent. Alexandra, you are leading a responsible AI office. So how did that start? Why is there a responsible AI office?
At ZEISS, yeah, great question. The Responsible AI Office was actually an initiative from my predecessor, and the initial trigger, as probably in many organizations, was the UAI Act coming into force in 2024. So that's when she, being a lawyer, pushed like responsible AI across ZEISS, brought the initiative to life, and her vision that I've just picked up, if you will, was to bring like people from interdisciplinary backgrounds together to one table, in our case, to one office. That's like we have a lawyer from our legal department who's looking at IT law or tech law. We have cybersecurity and information security at the table. We also have data privacy in our round in the office. And we're looking also at ethics, like the question, not only is it allowed to do that from a legal perspective using AI, but also should we do that from an ethical perspective, from a societal perspective?
Super. It's really good that you have like a very interdisciplinary approach. What is like the driver behind that besides regulation that you think like on responsible AI on really as a really broad topic, including ethics and privacy and so on, which might even go a little beyond what the EU AI Act is asking for?
Yeah, if you look at the EU AI Act, so first, yes, the trigger was the legislation and compliance, of course. The second thing is if you look beyond, all these like different disciplines come together when you look at AI. And I'd like to also answer with an example that's recently going through the press without naming names and explicitly disclaiming that this is like my personal opinion in that matter, right? There are some AI enhanced glasses on the market, right? And it's a fantastic tool for people who have maybe hearing disabilities, who can actually be enabled to take part in conversations if these glasses can record and translate in real time, right? However, if these recordings are not treated like ethically, but go, let's say, to workers who are training the AI using all the recordings that they see, and people are not made aware that while they're being recorded, the AI using the glasses, record like their bank transactions, they're recording like in the bathroom, which is kind of awkward, right? You don't want to see anyone else across the world what you see in that moment. And yet that happens. So ultimately, when it comes to this really powerful AI technology, we want to be a trustworthy company. I mean, you could say, going back to the glasses example, it's an American company doing American things. We could kind of expect that, and it's kind of a scandal going through the media. However, we want to make sure that ZEISS as a company is a trustworthy company when it comes to that's really one of our values, like instill trust in our products and for our customers. And that's why we have responsible AI and all these different disciplines at the table when it comes to the technology.
Which obviously makes a lot of sense, at least from our point of view. So is it fair to say that the Responsible AI Office is leading all of AI governance at ZEISS?
Yes, orchestrating, I would say. When you say leading, so what we are looking at is kind of like a federated model. ZEISS as a company with 47,000 employees all across the globe, with like these different segments that we're operating in, from meditech to semiconductor industry, to I don't want to neglect anyone here, right? To microscopy, to industrial quality solutions, and so on and so on, like also in the consumer market. So very different segments that we are looking at. So we are basically the one central place looking at AI governance, at the regulations, and trying to be of service to everyone. Because I mean, there are certain things you don't have to do by yourself and reinvent the wheel all over again, right? So yeah, that's what we're orchestrating, I would put it.
I think that's already making the field very broad. Like there's a lot to do, a lot of opportunities. But on the other hand, you showed that it's necessary in a way, right? Because the example you showed is a very good one if you want to understand what trust and responsible AI is actually about. It's not just about one model that I figure out, okay, this model should not have any bias in it, but it's like a huge system. And sometimes, for example, the glasses you mentioned, or I don't know, like an industrial application. So does that even mean that you have like new requirements also maybe to other parts beyond just the AI part, the model part, but also like, I don't know, to other IT systems that now need to be treated a little different because AI comes to the game? Does that make sense? Is that really the case?
Well, the first thing when I hear you talk like that is like I'm thinking about AI security. Like other IT systems really have to watch out now, because if you look at like the vulnerabilities up to now, they all had vulnerabilities, right? They all were like how do you say that? Like in cybersecurity, you would say offer a threat surface, and there are tiny holes that like a manual attacker wouldn't have found so easily. But these days, if you come from the outside using like autonomous agentic AI, they can move in velocities we haven't seen before in that area, right? So they can just poke in holes into your IT. They can hack you within hours or days. If you look at the media, the very recent example was the McKinsey case, right? They had just tiny openings, but the agents were able to find these very quickly and exploit these to actually get to the IP of the company. So yes, other IT systems also at ZEISS have to change, to update, in order to protect our company IP.
Obviously, AI governance cannot be thought without data governance. What's your approach on that? We now see companies trying to bring that together. They say, hey, that cannot be separate. We see others that treat it quite separately. What's your approach at ZEISS?
That is a really great question. If we're looking at agentic AI and where the real like value generation lies, like if we look at agentic AI like a possibility to do process automation, like end to end, not just automating I don't know, your email inbox or something, but really look at the in-depth vertical integration of AI systems, then it all comes down to the data and data quality that can be used. So yeah, we're looking at that from, I'd say, two perspectives. One is what kind of data do we need to be able to automate our processes properly where is the most value, and the other, like, that is one thing, like internally. And the second question is like, how can we make sure that we kind of have a data governance, data catalog, whatever you need to create, like to train AI models properly that can also be used in products. Why is that relevant? Because you need to make sure that you have all the copyright on the data, that the data quality is high enough, and so on and so on. So multiple approaches that we have that we try to offer as a service, for example, in ZEISS Digital Partners, so we do the data governance, but it's also kind of a federated approach that will be needed in the future, because doing that completely centralized in a company, like structured, decentralized structures like ZEISS, well, I don't think that's going to work in the near future.
But just to ask again, what's the relationship with that? So you said you're an orchestrator. So is data governance and people responsible for data governance, is that something where you basically from an AI governance standpoint would look, okay, is that done properly? Is the result, like data quality, is that in order? So we are compliant with AI regulations? Is that how I can think about it?
Yeah, so we're currently moving into that direction to bring AI and data governance closer together in order to produce the value for ZEISS as a company.
You already mentioned that you're working in a very federated approach, which means you have a central body, your team, and a lot happens then decentrally. In terms of people, you already mentioned there are a few disciplines involved. How many people are actually working on that kind of goal to have trustworthy or responsible AI in the end? Do you have like an estimation, like centrally, but also in the departments? Probably it's just a fraction of each developer, maybe, but maybe you have an idea of how much work this really costs you.
That is a really great question. I have never done an estimation before. What I can say is that we're working closely together with like people involved in regulatory affairs, when we're looking at medical products or something, right? That's their daily job, looking at legislation. We're working together with the information security responsibles in every segment. And they again have like structures where they have their cybersecurity engineers, which is a very specific role to actually be in the departments and be very close to the people where the development happens. And we're also working with the data privacy coordinators. So if I had to give an estimate, I think I'd end up with around like 300 to 500 people. I think that's around the number we have in cybersecurity engineers that are going to be trained also in the future to be able to assess the risk that comes with AI.
Interesting. Let's maybe shift the viewpoint a little bit towards, let's say, implementation, and what you actually do. So obviously you're orchestrating that, but I'm sure you're also implementing certain measures or audits. Also, basically, so what's the effect in the organization?
What we actually do is, I think it comes down to, you could say, 4 areas. One is training and awareness and communications. And I'm mentioning this as a first because usually in the technical domain, this is the first that you would neglect. But how can you expect people to actually, and that would come to my second area that we are working in, to use guidelines and policies if they are just a PDF somewhere in your management system if no one knows about. So that's where the training and information and awareness campaigns come into place. The networking, the spreading the word, if you want, like via email, via events, via a responsible AI hub that we just initiated, right? Second, creating the policies and guidelines along the UI. Like, we know that thing by heart. Meanwhile, it's like a 144 pages document plus I don't know how many amendments we are facing right now. So breaking that down also into one-pagers that can easily be distributed, like little tiny kind of pieces also that are digestible for persons who are not reading the UI. Because if you would do that, they would probably fall asleep. So breaking that down, putting it into nice formats, writing the policies and guidelines. The third area is the consultation. Like, you can't expect people from these one-pagers or some policies, like high-level policies or guidelines, to actually be able to understand what does that mean, what the UAI Act says. What does a transparency requirement mean for me as a developer, for me as a designer? So we put together, like, for example, design instructions. How should you mark your AI generated content so that it's clear it's AI generated, but also it's in alignment with ZEISS branding communication guidelines, right? So these are the very practical things that we do. And now I think I forgot the fourth area. It's like the consultation. It's not just a breaking down, but also consultation in all sorts of questions. You can imagine we see still many new cases around ZEISS every day where people really want to do the right thing. They want to know what they have to keep in mind when they're starting like a pilot use case for the AI system. Which kind of data can I use? In which country can I use it? How can I make sure that this is a responsible approach to take to solve my problem? Or customers have questions around like, hey, I've heard that there's this paragraph coming into force like in a few months. How are you addressing that? And then the sales team can just write us an email and we're like, okay, we're looking into this for you. Yeah. So that's like covering what we do, plus if there's any, let's say, AI incident to be handled, if there's anyone who's not comfortable with, I don't know, Copilot outputs, or anyone registers some suspicious activities, or I don't know, whatever you can think of. Then we're also there to orchestrate like the response to that using the people and processes that we already have, like from privacy or from cybersecurity, because they are really the experts in managing these kinds of incidents and orchestrating responses, escalations if needed. So that's kind of our daily job. Plus everything on top of that, like discussing with Works Council around their concerns about their needs when it comes to AI system regulation within Germany, for example, like making sure that everyone is aligned.
Interesting. I have an add-on question.
Yeah.
I know ZEISS is super big on data products. We had Markus Mortner, for example, also in this podcast, but also at events, at our events, and part of data products is now with the data contracts, to try to automate governance, to make sure, when things are happening, that you already have a few basic checks in there. For example, if a data product contains personal information, stuff like that. Is that also something you look at with AI governance?
You see me nodding. Yeah, we're looking at that possibility now that we have like a, let's say, good understanding. Now, I've been with ZEISS like 1.5 years now, and we kind of started this responsible AI office as a small pilot, if you want, and I have now a better idea of what it takes from every segment, also from central perspectives for the company, from a process perspective, to be successful in ZEISS. Like, I mean, it's not only having this high-level governance slide that you might get in any consultancy, but it's really about getting into the processes that ZEISS has implemented as a company, and then understanding how people work and do their everyday work. And so coming back to your data products and automation question, yes, that's something we're looking at this year. But I have no good answer yet. But it will be really important in the emerging topic that we see right now, like in the agentic AI age. Like agents, there will be many, many agents that we will see. We don't see them yet, but that we expect that to come into place in 2026. And there, we don't want to become kind of a bottleneck with AI compliance checks that we say, okay, have you checked the risk of your agent? Have you registered? So there, we are looking into technical solutions as well. How can that be automated? How can we make sure that we have an overview.
Now we talked about implementation, but also on the conceptual level, I think there are a few tips maybe or ideas that you ran into when you implemented your responsible AI program to maybe reuse things already existing. Because I mean, AI governance is not the first thing we want to govern in companies. Obviously, there have been roles before that are governance oriented. There have been processes before. Technology, you already said, for example, GRC tools, data governance tools, and so on. So how did you approach that? Is that maybe a lever to get started more quickly and to deliver quicker on AI governance?
Definitely. I think that was one of the most brilliant ideas of my predecessor, like bringing together in the office also data privacy and cybersecurity experts. Because there you have two examples of, I mean, in data privacy, when GDPR came into force, they had to face similar challenges, like how can we bring that to the company? How can we bring the data governance? What are the processes for review, for approval? Who's responsible, right? So they were really valuable sparring partners in that, like setting up process that we went through. And on the other hand, the cybersecurity guys are more like the experts in the risk management part, as you said, like what's the risk? Like that's a specific way of thinking about the scenario. What kind of risks would we have? Like a structured approach there. And then assigning that controls, but also the risk ownership to someone. Because ultimately, it's not the responsible AI office who will decide if a risk is acceptable or not, because that goes back like to the segments and their managing directors, for example. Like we can only point out the risk, but the risk acceptance, the risk appetite that everyone has is not like cannot be decided centrally. Now we're again in the decentral approach. And that is something where the cybersecurity approach was really helpful in that way of thinking, assessing, getting clarity there and how we should handle that. So I think that's the answer to that. Like having these two disciplines at the table, not only with their general approaches, but with their established approaches at ZEISS was extremely valuable to leverage that.
I think that's a great recommendation also. So if a company is not looking at that this way, to team up there, because it makes complete sense. And then combining data governance in that, I think then already gives a very good overall picture. Talking about overall picture, let's maybe take a more global view on this. Obviously, we are here in Europe, having to comply with the EU AI Act, but there's regulation all over the world. And I would like to understand your view on that. So how do you handle that? Keeping track of that? Then my understanding it's even contradicting what's demanded. I heard a few examples. They were more from the privacy side, how to treat personal data. But maybe you could give us just an overview. Yeah. So what's the global picture on this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a really great question, because that's where also the federated approach comes into place again that we have at ZEISS. For example, if you say data privacy and PII, that's completely covered, if it's AI or not AI, by our data privacy department and the data privacy coordinators. So that's what they're looking at. The second thing is like the cybersecurity. We have an organization that is established globally. And so this is our means to also look into global regulation. What we see right now is most important is India and China, because they have already legislation in place when it comes to AI, like in China, heavily tied to security as well, right? We keep coming back to that. And we are actually trying to make sure that at ZEISS we will establish a central AI register. However, we from Europe, as you say, cannot be like the approvers of any controls that they implement for a Chinese product, for example. So there we're establishing a kind of a process and a setup where still the Chinese lawyers will be consulted, because they're the experts in their field, right? But we're again orchestrating, like how can we work on this together and make that work so that the products can also be deployed, be assessed and deployed according to regulations, for example, in China.
Just out of curiosity, what are the main differences in the regulation? I'm sure they're not similar.
No, they're not similar. You mean from China, for example?
Yeah, from China.
They are mostly, I think they are mostly looking at content moderation. Like that's the scope of their law, like security and content moderation, if I'm not mistaken. And Europe is mostly looking at use cases from a risk-based approach. Like what's the risk to the general public if we would do this or that using AI?
So you already mentioned that the EU AI Act is a lot about risks, right? It's oriented on the individual in a way. How do you think about that? Is that like a good way to do responsible AI in general, or is that maybe even overlooking a lot of parts? Because in the end, you also said it's about creating trust internally into AI, also from your customers into the AI solutions you're delivering. So is that really the full picture? Because that's sometimes risk feels like it's just part of the picture, and it's like looks a bit like a legal picture, maybe also of this topic sometimes.
So I'm personally a huge fan of the UAI Act and what they try to govern here, because as opposed to the US, where they cannot like make up their minds on what they will actually want to regulate or not, and you're living like in the Wild West and have all kinds of use cases where you think like, oh my God, I don't want that to be done to me. Like just look at the recent conversation around public surveillance using AI, or about autonomous weapons using AI without a human in the loop. Both cases are not acceptable in the European Union. So I'm glad to be here. And when you look at the prohibitions in depth, there are not so many actually. So they are really in areas, if you want my personal opinion, where you really don't want to have AI systems without human oversight operating. Like some, I don't know, like some children's toys that automatically try to make children buy whatever, like for vulnerable groups. They are like protected by the UAI Act. When it comes to the high-risk systems, the picture we have to differentiate a little bit more. I think they really tried a good approach, but haven't thought it through maybe until the end, because the way it is written right now, and that's why it's also under discussion to be changed, especially when it comes to medical products, it's like really hard for companies to fulfill all the requirements. Plus, they haven't set the standards yet on how to fulfill the requirements. So, I mean, I really want high quality software when it comes to these high risk cases, right? I'm a space engineer. We are used to quality management, also in software development, because you only have one chance for that thing to go up. And the same is true when it comes to medical systems. However, I think there are some edge cases where they haven't like thought it through. For example, if they want to keep some algorithms on the market that have been working for 15 years, that have a proven track record of being helpful and accurate, but you can't provide the original data now when the high-risk requirements come into force, that would force you to take that product off the market if you're a European company. And that's a little too hard. And so I think it's the right thing that they are now adjusting at these points, which is also, I think, a precedent in European legislation, that they are adjusting like only like less than 2 years after the law came into force. So the original answer is yes. I like the regulation. I like that the EU is trying to do the right thing, and I think it's good that they also like viewing this as an iterative process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, things are moving so fast in AI. That makes sense. Add-on question to that. I mean, there's a lot of discussion whether AI or the AI Act and compliance and regulation, it's basically slowing down European companies. And I think you as a global company have a great view on that. And you already alluded a little bit on that topic with the Agentic AI, where you said you don't want to slow down your own company or your development. So what's your take on that? How can we be compliant but not too slow?
Oh, I love that question. So the approach that we're taking is that let me rethink my answer. The point is, I think that this hits mostly industries that are not regulated per definition. So if you are working in a regulated industry, like in finance, insurance, in the medical technology, in space or defense, if you will, then you're already used to a burden, if you want to phrase it like that, of regulations. And you just have the processes and you get kind of used to it, that you follow these processes, that you have kind of a quality management system. That, I mean, this is how things are. And now tell me that space is not innovative, right? They can still be innovative. So are medical technology manufacturers. And I think that, yes, for small companies, it might be a high burden to get that up and running. But right now we're at a point where I believe that you can do it. I mean, it's doable. They can do all kind of things using AI. So why not setting up a good quality management systematic process to help them be compliant? And I also think that the EU is looking at that as well, right? In the iteration that they're currently doing, like for small companies, having less the burden of proving all the requirements from a UAI Act and just being able to develop faster.
Yeah, I think that's the one part of their iteration right now, making it a bit simpler. But I think what you said before might be even more important, having like this level of detail added. So sometimes it's a bit vague, like what does that exactly mean? Like providing transparency or providing a risk management system and giving like a bit more level of detail how this could look like, so you're on the safe side, so to speak. I think that could also help, especially small companies that don't want to figure or spend like enormous amounts of money from time to time to have the conceptual work done. And having like a bit more of a clearer picture how this could look like might also help the smaller companies, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So when we're now looking like a bit back to what we discussed in the last 20, 30 minutes, I think there was a lot in it. If you would summarize like the learnings especially you took away from your journey on responsible AI, are there some key takeaways which you would recommend to others that want to do the same? in a sense, I mean, the same is obviously not easy to scope, but who want also to do progress on AI governance, who also want to create trust within their own company, and who want to ensure that customers still trust them. So what are like major tips you could give in that stage?
Mm-hmm. That's a really great question. Thank you for that. I think I would tell them to start small, like to look at one AI product or solution they want to implement and start governing from there, in a sense of document what you see, document the questions that you ask, like the provider or your team that develops things. Like start small, start with a prototype, document everything, and then iterate from there. Like get better over time, right? You have to start somewhere, and sometimes we have the ambition to set it all up at once, like spanning everything. That will not work. And then find the experts in your organization that can help you, like think people and processes. You have to have both in place.
Super interesting. Thanks so much, Alexandra. We will be seeing you at the Data Festival in Munich in June. And that will also be the chance for our listeners and viewers here to meet you in person and maybe dive deeper into this super important and super interesting topic. I'm really looking forward to that. And that's why I say see you soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, see you. Thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to the Data Festival.
Thank you. Take care.